Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ken Schatz, Professor of Political Economy at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and Director of our Initiative on Business, Government, and Society. So the GSB is a school of business, right? That's our name. But at some level, we're also a school of leadership. Leadership is a big deal around the GSB, but what do we mean by leadership? Well, the easy, quick answers about what leadership is about is it's about like my style, how I interact with the people around me, how I run an organization. But for leaders of companies and organizations that matter in the world, effective leadership also requires a deep understanding of a host of important contextual factors. That includes things in the global economy. It includes technological changes and disruptions, including things like AI. It includes environmental challenges. It includes political challenges, policy challenges, societal tensions, and things like that. Lots of different things. So because these things are so central to leadership for people at the top of organizations and companies, next year we're going to be formally transitioning the initiative that we've been doing on business, government, and society into a new institute on leadership. So stay tuned for that. So that's for those of you who are at Stanford, that's something coming down the road pretty soon. One of the goals of this initiative and institute is to foster student engagement on important societal issues and challenges. And that's partially because these are interesting and important things in society, but it's also because they're central to leadership. We want our students, when they assume the mantle of leadership at the top of companies and organizations, we want them to have a deep understanding of a variety of different societal issues. And we also want them to have a well thought out and principled view on what is and is not the responsibility of business in addressing those issues, what is and is not the responsibility of government in addressing those issues, and how they can collaborate and work together. So to develop this sort of sophisticated understanding and principled views requires hearing from, engaging with, and learning from people with a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different perspectives. And Stanford is the sort of place where, as an academic institution, we bring people together to do that. And we do that with respect and civility when we engage in civic discourse at Stanford. I want to acknowledge briefly the co-sponsors of this event. There's a lot of them. So the Stanford Precourt Institute for Energy, the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research, the Center for Revitalizing American Institutions at the Hoover Institution, and then some groups outside of Stanford, the American Conservation Coalition, the Ham Institute for American Energy at Oklahoma State University, and the Energy Freedom Tour. At this point, I'm going to hand things off to Dr. Ann Blunzer-Pullen, Executive Director of the Ham Institute, and Benji Blacker, founder of the American Conservation Coalition.
All right, thank you so much, Ken, and thank you, Stanford, for having us here today. Benji and I are thrilled to be here. Yeah, come on up. We're excited about what it's going to take to innovate, build, and win in regard to energy, and it's only going to happen with the young, bright minds in this room. Stanford University has been a beacon of light on innovative energy entrepreneurs that have changed the course of how this country works and powers itself. And there is not a more important time ever. I think we are at a crossroads on how we get more power to the people for what needs to be done. Specifically for AI right now is the challenge, but there'll be another challenge in a decade, and then there'll be another one. And Stanford has continued to bring the leaders into that space. And that's why we are so honored to look at Stanford and your alums today and showcase them and let them talk about how they see this problem being solved. My job in higher education at the Ham Institute for American Energy is to make sure the workforce is ready for that and that they're excited about this industry in the energy sector and all the brilliant opportunities you all are going to have in the fantastic jobs. But more importantly, once you have that job, the impact you're going to make. Benji founded an organization that was all about that. I'm going to let him talk a little bit about that.
Awesome. Well, good morning. Thanks for having this incredible event. I mean, when I think about the future of this country, most people don't think of energy as the future of what careers our generation wants to forge, but it is the best career to choose. We need 750,000 new employees in the energy sector to power the future of this country and to meet the energy demand that's growing. If you care about AI, energy is the place to be. If you care about software and tech, energy is the place to be. If you care about the environment, energy is the place to be. And so if you care about your career, this is the place to be, this event today, and the future of energy will be paved by the leaders in this room. And so we're really excited to partner up with Stanford, but also the Ham Institute, Oklahoma State, ACC, my organization that I started in college. I started it just up the road at another Pac-12 school, UW, go Dogs. We started ACC because we believed that there needed to be a new environmental movement in this country that also believed in all of the above energy. That you don't just need Tesla, you don't just need Exxon, you need Tesla, Exxon, you need solar, you need wind, you need geothermal, you need it all to power the future. And that's what this event is about today. So thanks so much for having this. Thanks so much for being here. And let's create the future of American energy.
It is now my honor to introduce the director of the Precourt Energy Institute. Been enjoyable getting to visit with you this morning. Really proud of the work that you're doing and all the different institutes within your institute. But Dr. Will Chu, and he has just recently also been named the Doug Kimmel Professorship at the Institute, which is a friend of yours, Secretary Burgum. And so we love seeing the connectivity of the people here at Stanford giving back to the things that matter most, in my opinion, that's energy right now. So come on up and let's keep the program moving.
Mr. Secretary, welcome back to the farm. We are honored to have you join the GSB Centennial Celebration today and to talk to our students about how they can roll up their sleeves and contribute to one of the most fundamental pillars that underlies the fabric of national and global prosperity, and that is energy. So allow me to talk to you about one of our alums who worked at the intersection of science, engineering, and entrepreneurship. He studied geology and critical minerals here at Stanford, and often you can find him doing field work with his geological hammer. After he graduated from Stanford, he worked on launching mining operations on gold, silver, zinc, and other critical materials necessary for economic growth. But he didn't stop there. Like you, Mr. Secretary, he entered public service and amplified his love of nature, particularly fishing. I'm talking about President Herbert Hoover, who was in Stanford's pioneer class of 1895. He was known, for those who don't know, as the fishing president. So coming to today, Stanford students and alumni, we have many in the room, are continuing to change the world through innovation, entrepreneurship, in energy, working on all facets of energy generation, transmission, storage, utilization, and everything in between. Let me give you a few examples of what they're working on. They're using AI to make Earth-abundant batteries faster, cheaper, so we can have a reliable grid. They're innovating the designs of data centers so to use less electricity and also figuring out where to build them to harness capacity on our electricity grid. Our students and alumni are designing advanced power electronics for efficient and reliable electricity grid of the future. They're also developing novel business models to deploy utility-scale solar. They're using innovations in hydraulic fracking to extract geothermal heat to deliver clean and firm electricity. Our students and alumni are studying the security and the competitiveness of nuclear fuel supply chain to accelerate the learning curve of nuclear electricity. And they're also using satellite images to detect and mitigate methane leaks. These are just a few examples of the wonderful work that is happening here at Stanford. We are so pleased to welcome you back to Stanford to inspire our students to bring innovation across business, technology, policy to deliver affordable, secure, and sustainable energy for everyone. Like Herbert Hoover, Secretary Doug Burgum is no stranger to rolling up his sleeves. Before earning his MBA from Stanford in 1980, he put himself through North Dakota State while moonlighting as a chimney sweep. In 1983, Secretary Burgum famously bet the farm and provided seed funding for Great Plains Software, which was later acquired by Microsoft. And he took the company through successful IPO. Doug then spent 6 years as the Senior Vice President of Business Solutions at Microsoft and later co-founded Author Ventures and Kilburn Group. And this cemented his reputation as a businessman and an investor. And during that time, he also served on the GSB Advisory Council. Secretary Burgum transitioned to public service in 2016, winning the North Dakota governorship and was reelected in a landslide in 2020. And Forbes recognizes him as America's best entrepreneurial governor. So this is very fitting of today's centennial. Today, Doug serves as the 55th U.S. Secretary of Interior and also chairs the U.S. National Energy Dominance Council. Doug, thank you for your service. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Secretary Burgum to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. Will, thanks for that great introduction. I always like to lead with gratitude, and I'm going to start now with, you've heard about all the thanks for the organizers, the organizations, everybody pulled it together, but I'm going to focus on the students that are here. This is a fantastic turnout, and it is so important that all of you are here, and my gratitude is for all of you because when I think back to the time when I was at Stanford and I was leaving here, I had no idea when I left here in 1980 that 3 years later, that I was going to be literally betting the farm to get into PC software. I mean, when we were at business school, we had a mainframe. There wasn't any PCs. It wasn't even on the radar. We didn't talk about it. Advisors weren't saying, "Oh, there's going to be a huge revolution in Silicon Valley. You're all going to end up in this explosion of software, which is going to be the greatest extension of human capability ever." Nobody said that. But I'm going to give you a tip right now, which is human flourishing on this world has really always been dependent on affordable, reliable, and low-cost energy. Places that have lower energy and more energy, end up with longer lifespans. They end up with cleaner environments. They end up with greater health outcomes. They end up being, generally more peaceful and less conflict. And so it is certainly. I think the world is going to wake up to a level of consciousness that we need more energy. And so I would just say there is no energy transition. It's energy addition. We still have, 800 million people on the planet that don't even have electricity. And then we have places on the planet where they have it, but it's highly, highly expensive. And now we have something else that's happening, and it's happening right here, and it's starting in the Silicon Valley. I mean, we've always been able to use a kilowatt of electricity for running the lights or, maybe cooking dinner, and all of those things were cleaner and better for the environment, regardless of the source than, burning wood or other source like that. I mean, because we still have people, those 800 million people are still cooking their dinner and heating their homes often with wood. So we have a tool called electricity, which we've all just take for granted. We flip the switch, the light comes on. But now, for the first time in human history, a kilowatt of electricity can actually be converted directly into intelligence. This has never happened before. This is the miracle of the advanced intelligence, the artificial intelligence being created right now. And the demand for electricity is going to just drive and change everything about the industry because the demand, I don't know when would demand stop? I mean, we're going to need less intelligence. I mean, when we can, transform every other industry. And again, when we talk about data centers being built and data centers driving demand, I just would ask everybody, stop calling them data centers. I mean, a data center, that's an old name. That's a term from my lifetime in tech. Because you'd have, if it's a healthcare data center, you've got a provider and a payer and a patient, and it's a closed loop system. We're going to solve this, bill for healthcare. If it's a shopping data center, then I got a big shopping retailer, and I've got a customer, and maybe I got a third party. But artificial intelligence at GPT, it's general purpose technology. It can be used by anyone. It can be used It can be used to cure cancer. It can be used to transform how we think about delivering education. Think about how we can, deal with, recovery of addiction. I mean, there's 1,000, it's every single topic where we have a problem, applying more intelligence is going to lead to better outcomes. So the demand for this is coming along. And guess what happens? The 30 years that I was in tech, all of tech took 1% of the nation's electricity. Nobody cared about electricity. I never went to a meeting, a board meeting, a CapEx meeting. When I was at Microsoft, for those 6 years when I was there as a corporate officer, we grew the company from 40,000 people to 90,000 people. We grew net income from 9 billion to 18 billion. I was one of 10 corporate officers at the time. When I started, I was one of 12 when I left. And I ran into Greg Maffei, who was the CFO during that time. I said, did I not get invited to the CapEx meetings? Because I don't remember going to any of those. And he laughed. He goes, no, we never went to them. We spent like $50 million a year. If we needed, we did two things. We hired software developers and salespeople. If we needed an office in Singapore, or Munich, we leased it. Now the 5 largest tech companies in America, their CapEx budgets for this next 12 months is $384 billion. And most of that is going towards the chips and the power and the buildings to drive AI. So AI CapEx spending from those 5 companies is bigger than the next 5 industries. It's bigger than automotive. You take the next 5 industries and combine them, automotive, steel, you name it, shipbuilding, all the big traditional CapEx buildings, it doesn't add up to $384 billion. This all happened while you've been sitting here in school. It's the biggest change. And what's going to happen? That capital is going to be bifurcated. It's going to go to places where, what? Where there's low electricity prices. You would never build a flour mill 100 years ago in a place where wheat cost 3 times as much as someplace on the other side of the line. And part of the power prices in this country are determined by not just federal policies, but state policies. States that were pursuing policies that have high prices are going to miss out on capital investment. States that have affordable, reliable electricity prices are going to see enormous amounts of electricity coming. So there's an investment tip right there for you, okay? That's where capital is going to flow. It's going to change all kinds of markets. I'm looking forward to the panel we're going to talk about here, but I would say, why is this important? Why does it matter? Because the reason why in this administration we have an Energy Dominance Council, think of dominance as abundance. And people say, oh, dominance is such an aggressive word. Well, there already was an NEC. There was already a National Economic Council. And so we couldn't have 2 in the White House councils with the same acronym. You couldn't have the National Energy Council and the National Economic Council. Very confusing. And so then, again, everybody loves, you guys are too young, but if you love, aging Australian rock bands that started over 50 years ago and never stopped touring, AC/DC comes to mind. So think of us as NEDC, but it's AC/DC. They had the black T-shirts with the lightning bolt. I think it would be a good logo. We'll be selling merch later. For the NEDC, but think about this. This is about how do we as a country do 2 things. It's about how do we achieve prosperity at home and how do we achieve peace abroad. I mean, because that's literally what it's about. I mean, energy diplomacy is part of why we've been able to stop conflicts around the world today. Part of the core mission we have is sell energy to our friends and allies so they can stop buying it from our adversaries. Because our adversaries, the 2 big conflicts that remain are the funding for terrorism. Iran was funding 24 terror groups off of their oil sales. Russia is funding a war against Ukraine and Western Europe with their oil sales and gas sales, oil and gas sales. So anybody that in Europe that's buying Russian gas is funding a war that they're also funding to try to support Ukraine. And it's a little bit odd. I mean, you probably wouldn't decide to fund both sides of a war. You'd say, let's just get on one side of it. So that's the strategy of the United States for allies. Sell energy to our friends and allies so they don't have to buy it from their thing. How do we do that? We have to have abundant energy. So we got to solve it for the world, for peace. We got to solve it at home for affordability. And we have to solve the electricity issue because of what the AI arms race are in. Because the AI arms race are in, we'll talk more about it on the panel, but the AI arms race is not, we can have the best tech, we can have the best chips, but if the other guys have more electricity, which they do, then that's a challenge for us to win that race. So looking forward to the panel, but you're here, you're at the critical moment in time. Energy is a high-tech industry. This is a completely high-tech industry from the production, the development. You get into the critical minerals we need for energy. That is of strategic importance. That's a whole nother topic, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But anyway, I want to thank all the students that are here because if you're here, you make an investment of your most valuable resource, your time. You made a choice to be here, not someplace else this afternoon, and you can be part of a solution that's literally going to change the lives of everybody on this planet. So thank you, and looking forward to getting Kyle up here. Let's give it up for Kyle from the GSB.
All right, Secretary Burgum, we're so thrilled to have you here at Stanford today. Now, as many of you may know, today is a very special day, not just because we have Secretary Burgum with us, but it's also the centennial of the Stanford GSB. Now, if we think back 100 years, the thought of AI and artificial intelligence was more than science fiction. It wasn't even conceived of. And now we're talking about some of the themes on critical energy, abundance, and would love to dig in a bit more on some of the themes you touched on in your address. So with that, Secretary Burgum, you grew up in rural North Dakota. You attended Stanford GSB. You've built, invested, and scaled successful technology ventures. You've had a successful career in politics. So with that, how does your upbringing and experience shape your approach at the Department of Interior?
Well, that's an easy one, Kyle, because the Department of Interior is an amazing place. If we were a standalone company, we'd have the largest balance sheet in the world. I mean, larger than any of the largest sovereign wealth funds. I mean, there's over 550 million acres of surface, 750 million acres of subsurface loaded with minerals, 2.5 billion of offshore. The name Interior is kind of misleading because it should be called the Department of Everything. Because we do have everything, all the sources, energy, mining, timber, grazing. I mean, all the public land use we have, hunting, fishing, recreation itself is a $1.2 trillion economy that depends largely on public lands. And then with the offshore, we've got all the way from all of our Pacific allies that are the territories. I mean, think from American Samoa to the Virgin Islands. Those territories are all part of Interior. So maybe it should be called Department of Exterior. But it is a huge, massive thing. And a lot of those lands are in the West, of course, national parks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, greatly influenced by Theodore Roosevelt, who set the country on this course of public lands over 100 years ago. But when you grow up in a place like North Dakota, you don't, and that's all you know. I mean, a town of 300 people, everybody that was there made a living off the land. And so if you are around people like that, then you know that these are the people that care deeply about the land, the water, the soil health. And as governor of North Dakota, I mean, I was living in a state that we were blessed by one thing. We had great abundance. I was also blessed that we only had about 7% of our state was federal lands. Some of the western states are 60, 70, 80%. I walk into Alaska, Nevada, Utah, and the governors look at me and they go, "Oh, the landlord's here." It's because we have so much influence and we're in terms of how those policies are delivered. But at a fundamental level, when you've got a state like North Dakota, the people that have lived there for generations care deeply about all that thing. And so if anybody ever wants to be the Secretary of Interior, I would recommend be the governor of a Western resource state first, because everything that you have to do, whether Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Indian Education, Fish and Wildlife, all of these things you've had a thing to. The only thing I didn't have in North Dakota, if you haven't noticed, North Dakota is the center of North America. Literally, there's a town, Rugby, North Dakota. We're the center of North America. So then when they told me that I had 2.5 billion acres of offshore, I was like, I got to learn, I got to go to school on that, because I had never been on it. Knew a lot about oil and gas, never been on an offshore platform. Marine mammals wasn't a big thing. That didn't come up in North Dakota Fish and Game. So anyway, that part's been great, but it's been a great training ground. It's a super honor to serve. And in America's balance sheet, by the way, it's yours. That you all know that we have $36 trillion of debt that gets pounded into you every time we have a presidential campaign. We're in debt. Here's how much debt is yours. They divide it out for every American. Well, I got to tell you that if we have 36 trillion in debt, we don't know the number. There is no balance. I haven't found the balance sheet. We're looking for it. We're building it. But all of you could own part of 2 or 3 or 400 trillion dollars of assets. 400. I mean, that's what all of this is worth. And if I've got the biggest balance sheet in the world, then I also hold the record of having the world's worst returns, because we are not getting the returns that we could be getting. And even developing appropriately 1% of these things would help pay down our deficit, improve our energy, help us with our competitors as we chase AI around the world. But we're blessed. We're certainly blessed with the glorious abundance that we have in this country.
Well, it's wonderful to hear more on your values and how that's really shaping every decision you make in the Department of Interior. I want to piggyback on your point on AI and talking through the billions of dollars in CapEx going into that. We're seeing, AI data centers, electrification, and industrialization of the U.S. all pointing to this insatiable demand for energy. How are we going to meet that demand both responsibly and efficiently?
Well, we have to do it responsibly, efficiently, and we've also got to focus on affordability because there's a real concern around this country. There's some in local townships, counties, states are saying, "Oh, not in my backyard. Electric prices are going to go up. We don't want AI. We don't want these artificial intelligence factories there in our location." So we've got to do education. We got to help on that, but we also got to work on the supply side. Again, it's not about energy transitions, energy abundance. All of you know supply demand. We've got to increase the supply of the amount of power that we're generating in this country. And one way we do that, we got to cut enormous amounts of red tape. And we've got to get back to embracing some technologies. I mean, I don't know, how did nuclear become out of favor? I mean, this is something where, again, in the administration, President Trump earlier this year signed 4 executive orders helping to unshackle the regulation off of nuclear. Since the date of that, the signing of those things, there's been a record amount of venture capital flowing back into, over a dozen that I know of, companies that are doing nuclear, the small modular nuclear, et cetera. I mean, this is all super great. And then the other economics, again, I mean, Will was talking about the importance of actually teaching energy economics. Stanford could lead on this. We all talk about energy, is it clean or not, renewable or not? I mean, no, how about, is it affordable or not? That's what drives Americans. I mean, there's an elite group that are willing to pay green premiums, but if you want to clean up a planet, you got to have it be as clean as you want. It's also got to be affordable. And so this is a thing that we should be driving, for. And again, the economics of something like small modular nuclear, you put it next to where the load is. I mean, part of what the challenge that we faced with the so-called renewables, particularly wind and solar, is we're going to build them in North Dakota, but then we're going to use the power on one of the 2 coasts. Oh, that's a great idea. Now we need, $2 trillion of transmission lines. And then what's going down the transmission line when the wind's blowing? Nothing. No electrons. And in solar without batteries is the same thing. I mean, we were subsidizing transmission lines that weren't carrying any load. And solar is it has a place, but a long ways away from the load makes it economically. It's not ideologically, it's economically, whatever. You be able to put small modular nuclear next to a load, then we save ourselves the cost of transmission. That lowers the cost for everybody else, and it's and I tell you, in our country right now, building horizontal infrastructure is like one of the hardest things in the world to do, because you can't, whether it's a transmission line or a pipeline, there's an entire industry that's built around stopping you from building that. I mean, it's just that they are experts at it. They make money, they fundraise off of it, and there's a whole legal profession around stopping that. I mean, you couldn't build the interstate highway system today with the current legal environment we have. So it's another thing. It's just a mandatory thing. If you're involved in AI and you're working for an AI company and you need more electricity tomorrow, you better figure out a way to build your power plant next to where the energy is and your AI factory next to where the electricity is. And then you can ship your finished product called intelligence on a fiber optic cable. And at least so far, I haven't seen any protests for people stopping fiber optic cable running around our country. But I think that's one of the changes we're going to have to adopt.
Thank you for your comments on this, and I want to double click on how do you actually, accelerate a lot of these projects. So you've declared an energy emergency and promised to cut reviews down from years to even weeks. So what does that actually look like in practice? Is this a handful of select cases, or is this applying more broadly? Help us kind of paint a picture of what's happening.
Well, it has to be more broadly, because we will absolutely lose the AI arms race if we allow ourselves to be in a position where permitting is an endless cycle of legal challenges and battles, et cetera. That doesn't necessarily, to what end that would occur. And permitting is one of these things that's been weaponized. I mean, it's become a weapon where the delays, the tactics, whatever. And what does it do? Again, if you've got folks here from the B school, capital goes to places where it can get not just a return, where it has a shot at getting a return. Who's going to put capital up, for nuclear energy if you think it's going to take you 20 years to get through the permitting process? No, that just dries up the capital. Or they'll go to some place where capital can actually be deployed. You got to deploy it to get a return. And so part of by unjamming this permitting backlog that we have across the federal government, this became the norm. That's going to free up literally trillions of dollars of capital is going to start flowing towards projects that, again, will help human flourishing, lower the price of electricity, clean up the environment, all that. We got to get the capital flowing. And so then when I came in, they said, hey, what's an EA, environmental assessment? Oh, it takes a year. How about an EIS? Environmental impact statement takes 2 years. That's on a good day. Then, normally with delays, it can take double those timeframes. And we all just kind of accept it as Americans. Oh, that's what it takes. It must be really hard to do one of those things. It must be really complicated because they have a lot of pages. Well, then you actually look at the law, and then you look at what they're supposed to do, and then you look at how it's done. And it's like, I would start it out, and then I would email it to Kyle, and I'd say, hey, Kyle, I'm working on this EIS. You got 30 days to get back to me. And then Kyle sends it to Catherine, who sends it to Dick, who sends it to Don, who sends it to Nick. It goes around, and then all of a sudden we got 20 people working on this thing, and 2 years have gone by. And then you get to the end, and like, oh, some state law changed. We forgot this. Here's a new thing. Congress did that. And then they start the whole cycle over again. And I looked at the actual workload that was in there. By the way, and when I was in software, what we did for 30 years was business process improvement. Fundamentally, that's what we were in that business of doing. And there wasn't 2 years of workload in there. So we just said, aspirationally, what would happen if we put a strike team and you get up every day and all you're doing is working on this permit, and that's all you're going to do. Tomorrow you come, you work on the permit. If you got to stay overnight, stay overnight. This is an energy emergency. We're losing. We got an EA done in 12 days. We got an EIS done in 24 days. And immediately, well, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. You should be clapping. This is good for America. But then people said, oh, well, you'll never, it'll never pass muster. They'll sue and it'll go to court. And I said, I've looked at the old ones. I've been on the receiving end when we were a state that was busy suing the federal government because the federal government was blocking us from being able to execute in our own state. And I would put that 24-day EIS up against a half a dozen 2-year and 3-year EISs, and then let a judge try to pick the one out of the pile that took 24 days. And he wouldn't, because the quality of the product's actually better. If you guys all got together in a team and said, this is all we're going to work on for the next month, I would trust that the quality of that versus something that went through some, email string. So anyway, some of it, and this is before we've applied AI. This was just brute force task force that we've done the last 8 months. And so now we apply AI to that, and you read all the permits that have ever been given for a certain type of project. And guess what? Now all of a sudden, like every other thing, you can take about 80% of the work out and get a first draft that moves you out to like year 6 month or 1 year in. You're 1 year in with a first draft, just using AI. We haven't even applied that yet, and we were getting it down to days and weeks versus years. And we'll keep driving it. It's essential. We will lose the AI arms race if we don't take these kinds of actions.
It's incredible to hear about all the progress you're making, and great to hear about all those cuts to make things move more quickly. I want to ask you one last question before we bring out our fantastic panel. You touched on enhanced geothermal, and we're seeing new technology innovations there that can bring clean 24/7 baseload power. What do you see as the future of geothermal in our energy mix, and what can the Department of Interior do to help speed that up?
Well, the Department of Interior's got a lot of land, and we got a land that's got heat underneath it, with thermal activity. And part of what, again, I don't know if anybody here is studying material science, but that's the piece. I mean, geothermal is, thank you, Will's got his hand up over here. If you're interested in material science and geothermal, go talk to Will after this. We're at the new institute. Anyway, we have, it's about depth and it's about precision. And if we can get down deep enough and get into those hot layers, we can create some really low cost, exciting power that would be, dispatchable 7 by 24 hour, doesn't need heavy subsidies. All that would be just fit in the awesome category. But where they're learning the techniques for some of the stuff? They're getting it from places like in North Dakota. A typical Bakken well is 10,000 feet underground. They go down 2 miles, they turn a corner, and then you stay in a 30-foot strip for 2 miles and produce enormous amounts of oil and gas. And then we've got technologies like, injecting CO2. We had a company in North Dakota that was injecting CO2 down old wells, into the field, stimulating more oil. They were putting 40% more CO2 in the ground than the oil that was coming up. And so they were greener than Patagonia. I mean, a carbon net negative barrel of oil. And then so it's like so it's innovation, not regulation, that's going to solve the problems that we have. And people have said, oh, A is bad, let's regulate it out of business to save the planet. Well, when we do that, guess what we're doing? We're completely harming ourselves. China, if I read one more article about China and all their solar and all their electric cars and how great they are, yeah, they're doing all of that. Read the story about the fact that's absolute fact. They added 93 gigawatts of coal last year. They are growing coal faster than any other country except India. 93 gigawatts. 1 gigawatt is Denver. Okay, we inherited a plan from the last administration that actually lowered base load in America. And you can't lower base load and then add a bunch of highly subsidized intermittent electricity and then draw a line and say we're at the same level because we took away the stuff that we knew was dispatchable and replaced it with stuff that's only available when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. Then that just doesn't work. I mean, our grid is so close to failure. We had a couple of days this year on the East Coast in PGM, 60 million people there where the whole thing was ready to tip over just like Spain. And we were right on the edge. And here in California, I mean, we're talking with Patti. I mean, like, what, we're going to shut down a nuclear plant that's, 8% of the state's baseload and 17% of your greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, that would just be nutty. And I know people are concerned about, people get concerned about fear and safety and all that, but also understand there's another level up that I would ask everybody to understand, which is because the energy is so important, the weaponization of energy policy has been going on by our adversaries. And without sharing confidential information, but now as a member of the National Security Council, as part of my role, part of the national energy, it is something I always suspected, but it is a fact that, if Russia convinces all of Europe to shut down your nuclear, shut down your coal, and save the planet, oh, but by the way, we'll sell natural gas to you through the pipes that we're building and you're helping to fund, and then you get everybody dependent on them. It's a great business model. If you're Iran and you've got tens of thousands of people that go to every day go to work doing psyops against countries like ours, and if you're China and you import 11.5 million barrels of oil a day, of course you want to slow everybody else down. Of course you want people to sign on to climate goals where the U.S. is going to reduce its emissions while China's goes through the roof. Of course, it's great for them. It's bad for us. And we just have to wake up with the level of competition that we're actually in at that level. And if we're going to solve some of these grand problems that we have, AI is going to help us do that. But it's not going to work if we lose the AI arms race.
Thank you, Secretary Burgum. We'd now like to invite two incredible leaders to join us. Please join me in welcoming Drew Baglino, CEO of Heron Power and Stanford class of 2003, and Patti Poppe, CEO of PG&E and Stanford MSX class of 2005.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous. You're very close to the edge.
Once again, saved by the First Lady.
Well, I'm glad we're all safe up here. Now, between the three of you, we have a really special mix of perspectives, both from the federal government to public utilities and startups. Yet you're all tackling the same challenge: how to deliver both reliable and affordable power to meet this unprecedented era of energy demand. But that's not all you have in common. You're also all Stanford alumnus. And once upon a time, you were sitting where we are now. So with that, tell us a little bit about your journey and how you found your way into energy and eventually into the roles you lead today. Patti, would you like to kick us off?
I'll be happy to. Thanks for coming, everybody. I love what you said, Secretary, about everyone has a choice about what to do with their time, and they chose to come here. So bright minds are in the room. I actually grew up in Michigan, have been a lifelong Michigander, and went to Purdue University for industrial engineering bachelor's and master's, and then went into the auto industry for 15 years. So I grew up in factories. One thing I said to myself in college is, whatever happens, I'm not going to end up in a factory. Well, famous last words. So avoid absolutes. You never know some amazing place you're going to land. And so I grew up in the factories of General Motors and learning the amazing experience of building something every day and knowing at the end of the day, did you do a good job or not? Did you hit the numbers or didn't you? And I found great satisfaction in that. And then I came to Stanford and it changed my life, and it opened my eyes to a great big world, and then switched to energy and joined the utilities in Michigan, and then I ran power plants, coal-fired power plants for DTE Energy, and then came to Consumers Energy, where I became CEO in my hometown utility. My dad retired from there. I grew up in the town where our company was and was pretty much a company gal. And then got the call to come to PG&E. And as a bold, unexpected move and active service, I know you've taken an active service for our nation. I felt like I was doing the same. PG&E needs to be strong. We do power AI. We power the fourth largest economy in the world. And we need a strong and capable PG&E for an energy system of the future. I was very excited about an all of the above energy future. I was excited about the ambitions of the state and finding ways to do it affordably. It's been a key part of our ambitions, but also attacking one of the key outcomes of climate disasters and extreme weather. The wildfire and the risk of wildfire here in California is extreme, and I really felt called to do my part to make it safe. And we've taken a stand at PG&E that catastrophic wildfire shall stop, and we feel we need to make sure that we can both. We never want someone to have to choose between having energy or being safe. And right now, I have customers all over my state that are making that choice every day. And we need to be able to have infrastructure that's built for purpose, that keeps people safe and keeps them energized, and power the prosperity of the world through the amazing tech companies here in the Bay Area we're so privileged to serve. So that's been the journey. And it all started here at Stanford. So
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, everybody, for having me here today. My energy story started a little bit in high school, mostly reading about kind of, at that time, there were still a lot of people talking about peak oil. And so I sort of got a little bit interested in that concept and was trying to think about, well, where can I actually have an impact on energy? And I was like, oh, maybe I'll go to do environmental engineering. And everybody who I talked to about that said, well, I think that's wastewater engineering. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem like it's what it should be. And I somehow got tipped off by my English teacher in high school that, hey, Stanford is a great place where they have amazing engineering programs, and I think you can even make your own major there. And my son went there, maybe you should go there. So I came out and visited, and I fell in love with the place. My father was an electrical engineer, so I figured, okay, I guess I should be an electrical engineer. And I went through 3 years of the electrical engineering undergraduate curriculum and was like, everybody around me is doing like widgets and consumer electronics, and that doesn't feel very impactful. So I actually stopped out and I went on a world tour, ended up funnily in New Zealand studying whether they could conform with the Kyoto Protocol by using hydrogen as a transportation fuel. It's like a very wonky topic, but it was the time of Kyoto Protocol. People were signing it, or it seemed like they would sign it. So it seemed like a useful thing to study. And so that was an energy economics exercise. Like, okay, where's the energy flow in the economy? Where does hydrogen fit in? How would you make it? Like, would it be efficient in the end use? What's the well-to-wheel efficiency? And so tracing that primary energy journey of that entire nation was super fun. I came back, I turned it into an honors thesis, Goldman honors thesis in environmental science and public policy. If that program still exists, you should consider doing it. I found it really fun. And at the end of that, I kind of, was like, oh, maybe I should do policy stuff. I graduated, but before graduating, I met J.B. Straubel, founder, CTO of Tesla, and we went on a field trips course, which maybe still exists. It was Gil Masters' field trips course, where we visited all of these amazing energy installations around California, went to the Hoover Dam, we went to net zero buildings and all different kinds of cool places to visit. Went to GE Wind's production facility. Shell Solar was doing vapor deposition, thin film solar, all kinds of stuff. So I got to know JB pretty well. And as I was graduating, he was like, well, I'm starting this electric car company in my garage. Maybe you should come work for me. And I said, well, JB, can you pay me? And he said, no. So I was like, so I actually went and worked at a policy think tank in Washington, D.C., instead, which is an interesting decision on my part. Maybe I made a bad decision there, but well, we kept in touch. I worked at this policy think tank. It's called Resources for the Future, and its claim to fame was promulgating cap and trade, which is an interesting concept and was used in the U.S. to handle like acid rain very effectively on the East Coast, and in some other markets, and was also kind of the thesis behind the Kyoto Protocol and some of the carbon markets. But I got really bored with policy. It wasn't moving very fast. I kept in touch with JB, and he said, I can pay you now. And so I joined Tesla back in 2006 as an electrical engineer and a firmware engineer, and worked my way up from individual contributor writing motor controls code and in the Roadster, and to eventually taking JB's role when he left in 2018 and leading all of powertrain, batteries, power electronics, and eventually the energy business. So I built the energy engineering team that did things like power walls, power packs, mega packs. Worked with Patti on so many fun projects in California, which was really cool. Led the supercharger network. Started the 4680 program of Tesla making its own batteries, which was really fun. Investing lots of capital, doing hard things in the United States that people say you can't do, but actually you can. And getting that, that battery factory ramped first in Fremont, and then 50 gigawatt hour factory ramped in Texas. And eventually I was like, okay, I think I've done enough things to move sort of electrification forward with vehicles and the grid. It's time to do something else. And so I left. 8 months later, started Heron Power. And now I'm excited to be in a position to help reduce the cost of expanding the electricity sector, because really power electronics, we're a power electronics company, is everywhere. It's in data centers, it's in nuclear power plants, it's in solar batteries, factories, everything, substations everywhere. And that industry hasn't changed too much. I saw that up close and personal working on large, like 100 megawatt megapack installations and building factories. The one thing that never seems to change was the stuff that you had to buy from somebody else. And so now I'm the somebody else, and I'm trying to change it.
Incredible. Thank you both for sharing such storied careers and your journeys to get where you are today. And it's just amazing. It all started right here at Stanford. As everyone knows, it's a special opportunity to bring both policymakers and business leaders together. So I wanted to bring all three of you into this next one. So Patti and Drew, what would make the biggest difference to your company's ability to meet energy demand? And for Secretary Burgum, what are you looking for from the private sector? Maybe I'll leave it to whoever wants to go first. So.
We're looking for speed. I mean, we talked about building great things in America, building hard things, but we got to build them fast. One example I'd give you is the Alaska pipeline built in 1976. This technological marvel, 800 miles from the North Slope. It is in the northern part. There's the permafrost. So they had to build it on stilts because it would have been the fluids going through it would have melted the permafrost, created problems. So then they had to build it with to be able to have shock absorbers. Then it had to go over 3 mountain ranges. So sea level to 4,100 feet, down, up, all the way down. Thing has been running for 50 years without any kind of incident through all that seismic stuff. It was built in 28 months. And there was no road. They had to build the road next to it. Okay. Now I take over the National Park Service in my home state. We had a washout on a road in the Badlands, Theodore Roosevelt National Park. It was my first year in office. They invited me to come to the ribbon cutting next week.
Oh my God.
My first year in office was 2016-17. So it's like, the federal government itself sometimes takes 8 years to do a road project that's just like a short little thing. This is impossible. We just have to say, stop. We can't do that anymore. We've got to be able to build great things quickly. And one of the things that we're working on, is building a natural gas pipeline from the North Slope to the southern Alaska, because for 50 years, every barrel of oil that's come out of Alaska has had natural gas, no place to put it. It's been re-injected into the ground. And now we have all of our Pacific allies, Japan, 120 million people in the size of North and South Dakota, no oil and gas. Korea, 51 million people, half the size of North Dakota, no oil and gas. Then you had Philippines, Taiwan, all of our partners from World War II. They're all importing, and they all get all of their energy today. As much as you might say, we wish that they were on something else. Today, they're like the rest of the world. 80% plus of what is coming in by ship to them. And China now has got the world's largest Navy. They're threatening, even this week, what they're threatening with critical minerals to basically shut down Taiwan with trade wars, from 2 days ago. And this is a super urgent thing. But anyway, these guys are, what's Japan doing? Japan is stockpiling Australian coal on the ground because they also shut down their nuclear after Fukushima. I mean, most of it was all shut down. They brought a little bit of it back. But I mean, we have got, it's 28 days from the Middle East to Japan. We've got military in Japan. We got 28,000 people stationed in South Korea. We got encroachments happening on all of our Pacific islands, and there's no energy security for our allies or our territories. And they could get it from Alaska. It's 8 days from Anchorage to Tokyo. And so we build this pipeline. There's trillions and trillions and trillions of cubic feet of gas that's up there. We just have to find a way to get it out. And then we say, okay, we want to build a gas pipeline 8 months ago. And they said to us, well, that'll take 10 years. Why? Oh, because the permitting will take 5 years. It's like, no, we have to build great things quickly. So we're looking for that from the private sector. That's just one example. We've got it down now. We think we can get this thing built in 3.5 years in Alaska. That's still longer than what it took. And now there's a road that already exists there. So we're trying to shave some more off of it. But, infrastructure like this is actually part of the path to world peace. Infrastructure in Eastern Europe, we can tell people stop buying Russian gas. We can ship it from the U.S. over there, U.S. LNG exports. But if they don't have a pipeline to actually get it to the countries that are dependent on Russian gas, we can harangue all we want. They don't have a way to buy it from us. So we've got to build global infrastructure to be able to execute on the plan of selling energy to our friends and allies. We've got to do it quickly.
Amen. I'm inspired by my colleagues here on the panel, and I think this is all something we learned at Stanford, that anything is possible and that we do not give up. And we are tenacious about making anything possible. I think part of the trick is deciding what anything is and what's the most important anything to do first. And I think speed to power right now is essential for America's prosperity and certainly for California's tech industry's prosperity. And so speed to power for us is enabled by a couple things. One of the things is using existing infrastructure. I think there's some misunderstanding about the availability of energy. And particularly here in California, there's some idea, and in fact, the tech companies believed that we were out of power. I think there's an easy narrative that says California was out of power. Here to report, not true. We have, actually, our grid is actually utilized about 45%. I learned that from my Stanford colleagues here, that we have an underutilized grid here in California. And we can leverage that existing grid to speed to power. And in this case, with just direct transmission lines, not across the plains, but across the street. The substations are there. There's a project that the San Jose mayor and I did a ribbon cutting on here just a couple weeks ago, or maybe, I don't know when that was, some time ago. I'm sure you feel the same. But we did a ribbon cutting at a 159-acre site across the street from one of our large substations, ready to power a new data center project that's going in there that companies like Prologis, your friend Hamid, are anxious to build. And those, I love the AI factories. I'm not going to call them data centers anymore. Is that what I'm supposed to call them? AI factories? Those AI factories power companies like Zoom and Netflix and Uber and DoorDash for all the AI that they're deploying to their companies here in town. I mean, it's just incredible. And we can do that fast. We just actually need to run a conductor. And then we can grow with the scale of that site. And so we do have power here in California. Speed to power through permitting is going to be really, really important. But use our existing resources and use them smartly. One last thing I'll say is an example of that. Every AI factory that is built and that exists already today have their own backup power resources. They back them up 100%, like for their load as a reliability case. We're not using that for grid. That resource is sitting there. We say we're short power. We say we're short power plants. We say we're short generation. We have all this untapped generation capacity at every one of these AI factories. If we just changed a policy and let us count that as a grid resource and then run it, we can optimize the system of the grid. That is existing resource that can be utilized. And I'm excited about being able to leverage existing resources, maximize their utilization. I am an industrial engineer, so whenever I see waste, I get maniacal about it. So I'm on a waste reduction spree We're going to utilize our grid fully, and that's what will make it a more efficient and more affordable system then. For the 10 gigawatts of new AI factory demand that we have on our grid here at PG&E, that 10 gigawatts of new load would reduce all customers' rates 10%, fully utilizing existing assets. It's an affordability prosperity play and never mind the $1.5 billion of new property tax to build housing and serve police and fire and public resources. $3 billion of new sales tax revenue for the state that doesn't exist today. This is a prosperity play. And so I think most important for speed to power is number one, believing that anything's possible, and then two, fully utilizing existing assets, and we can go a whole lot faster and cheaper.
Well said. I think what I would just say, and I was fortunate enough to spend actually a lot of time in China working at Tesla, because Tesla has a big factory in China and a lot of suppliers in China to support that factory. What they have is alignment, from the top to the bottom of what they're trying to do. And that's how they get it done. And what we haven't had is that. And so how do we get that, right? I think part of it starts with acknowledging, energy and GDP and all the outcomes that the secretary mentioned, they're all very clearly correlated. And so more energy is a good thing. Let's start with that. And then it's like, okay, well, how do we get more energy, right? And rather than changing the policy all the time, get some commitments, get some alignments, and hold it, and then let the private sector and the public sector work together to get things done. And that doesn't just relate to, we want to build more power plants. Well, it actually relates to everything. Like, how do you do interconnection processes? Well, so much of the time about interconnection processes is like, who's paying, and like, do you really need to invest, and arguing over it, because for a long time, and let's be fair, there wasn't electricity growth. There was almost like negative electricity growth. So it was the right thing to do to be questioning, a regulated utility, like, should you be making that investment? But it isn't anymore. And in fact, we want to be instead looking to the future and say proactively, we should be building ahead transmission corridors or distribution corridors, or without spending inexorable amounts of time just debating, again, who shoulders the cost, do we need it or not? And that is somewhat of a federal and state collaborative effort, because some of these things do cross state lines. And that, I think, enables clarity, and then you can get going on, okay, well, people developing new sources of load, they kind of know where to land. They can put together a 3 to 5 year plan. Generators can do the same thing. Operators can do the same thing. And all of a sudden, we're moving way faster than we are today, where the interconnection process can just be forever, and then you have to redo it immediately because everybody gives up on that location for whatever reason. The other thing I would say is, it isn't just about the hosting capacity or the cost allocation aspects of interconnection. It's also like the dynamic modeling piece of interconnection is becoming extremely complicated, where actually a lot of software could make it fully automated. And you see things like what Pearl Street is doing, or Tapestry, or what Heron's trying to do with sort of software that is intrinsically stable with anything we deploy. So like, there's no need to study it. It will always work, kind of like a USB concept for power electronics. There are ways to do this that will free up so much human capital, both on this allocation study, interconnection study, and the dynamic modeling side, to do useful things like plan ahead, rather than constantly reactively dealing with crisis A or B. And then the last thing I guess I'd throw out there, and again, this isn't specifically about at Heron, it's maybe more, it's more in Patti's turf, but we do have these grids that are underutilized. 45% is actually pretty good. I know of some others that are in the like 10 to 20% range. And part of that is by design in the past, and part of that needs to just change with policy, like enabling bidirectionality more than we have, freeing DERs, considering like negawatts as actual capacity, allowing behind the meter assets to participate in markets. Like, you can only really even do that in one market in the US. You can do it in tons of markets abroad. Making that more of a thing so that we can add liquidity to the electricity sector. So liquidity is an amazing thing, right? Why do the capital markets work? It's because they're liquid. Well, what hasn't been liquid? Electricity sector at all for decades. And so we wonder why all these like energy retailers go bankrupt in Texas when there's a crisis on the grid. It's because there's zero storage, and we have storage in everything else. We've got storage in natural gas markets, we've got storage in in petroleum markets. We've got a strategic petroleum reserve. We have never really had any storage in the electricity sector until recently, thanks to some people's efforts, including some of my own, maybe. But the point is, there's a lot more that policy can do to fully leverage that and increase the fungibility and the bidirectionality of the grid, increase utilization, amortize more kilowatt hours over the same fixed cost, increasing affordability. That's a big opportunity.
And just a stat to add to Drew's passion, which I love, Drew. This is why we love working together.
Yeah.
The electric vehicles on the road in my service area today are the equivalent of 9 gigawatts of dispatchable load.
Totally.
On the roads today. If I could turn those batteries around at a designated signal, that would be 9 gigawatts. That's, what'd you say, 9 Denvers. So that the ability to leverage what I call anyways economics.
Yeah.
Somebody bought the EV anyways. They didn't buy it to power the grid. But if it could, in fact, power the grid, wouldn't that be extraordinary? And so the first wave of that 9 gigawatts is not bidirectional. But all new vehicles coming online will be increasingly more bidirectional. You see it's a term Drew and I use loosely. What it means is like that Ford Lightning can plug into the house. It can also plug into the grid and be a little power plant where the people are and send energy back on a signal. Not every day, not 100% of its time. You're not going to deplete it to zero. But when we get close, 2 years ago, we came within a gigawatt on one hot day. That's 1 gigawatt. We're kind of tight. 9 gigawatts available. Just tap a little bit of it, an opt-in program that's free market. They get paid for the energy that they procured with the truck they bought. There's some really incredible technology that can enable a much more liquid energy system that can be dynamic to these dynamic demands.
Well, it's fantastic to hear your perspectives, and I wish we had just had more time. Unfortunately, we have about 10 minutes left, so we're going to transition now to the audience Q&A.
Oh, great.
So we have a few questions from the audience. One is from Aristotle Economan from the business school, and he asks, President Trump has said he wants to bring back energy and industrial might to the U.S., but it seems that pausing wind and other renewable energy projects contradicts that goal. Can you elaborate on your thinking on this topic and where you think we need to go when it comes to energy and power infrastructure in the U.S.?
Yeah, happy to do that. There's been a taxonomy which I think doesn't reflect the needs of the country, and that taxonomy has kind of been fossil fuels bad, renewables good. And I think from the context here, when we're talking about grid stability and competition, whatever, we have to focus on, you call it firm, you call it dispatchable, you call it reliable, you call it 7x24. But we over-rotated so far towards the intermittent, unreliable sources this is part of why we have, without storage, I mean, we got the intermittent sources, but not the storage that went with it, that we're creating all this risk for ourselves as a country, and then prematurely shutting down the base load. I mean, there's a time in the future say, hey, we got to shut this down. We got something better. We can replace, this source with that source, make incremental improvements on goals that people might have. But we over-rotate. I mean, the FERC queue, when I came in, the first thing I asked was, what's in the queue? And these are these interconnects. These studies take like 7 years. And yes, we should use AI and take the people out of it and speed it up. But 95% of the queue was wind and solar related. And I mean, like we're going to add even more. We're going to have even more intermittent at a time. And again, those two things are dependent on the weather. I mean, you guys are in business school. Read the report from Northern Europe. They built a bunch of solar. They built a bunch of wind in Northern Europe, and then companies went public based on that. And then this year they missed their earnings. They missed their earnings because they had a wind drought. They didn't blow as hard as they thought it was, and they came in 9% below, produced less power. So even when it's not just like every form of energy has got pluses and minuses. Every form of energy has got something that's better or worse about it. And we need for right now to sort of say, what are the priorities we have? And I think that one of the things that we're reflecting in this administration is we think that the two existential threats that we're focused on was Iran getting a nuclear weapon because they would have used it, and losing the arms race. Those are the two top things. It doesn't mean that people that care about, CO2 emissions, send me on the list. But it's not the thing that drives every other decision, because that was driving every other decision for a lot of Western democracies. And that's how we've ended up. That's how in England, they import 30% of their electricity from other countries. They're charging a 98% marginal tax on North Sea oil and have no sovereign wealth fund. Norway has got $1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, and they have the same resource. I mean, England is deindustrialized themselves. Why would you go to a place again that's got triple or quadruple the electric prices to build a new AI? An AI factory today is filled with robotics. I mean, you talked about, Hamid and Prologis. I mean, it's like a factory. When I was a kid, working in a small town where you had a forklift and some light bulbs, it was almost zero power usage in a warehouse. Now, if you just the current one today, like an Amazon warehouse, it's 25 kilowatts per square foot. It's not just an AI factory, it's everything about the new economy is going to require more electrical demand. Yeah. And if we're not producing it, it affects everything that we do. And so Germany spent $500 billion chasing a dream about renewables. And they spent that $500 billion. They shut down the nuclear, they shut down the coal, they shut down, all of these things. They did that. And now they produce 20% less electricity with less reliability at 3 times the cost. Is a German auto company going to say, I'm going to build a new automated plant there? No, they're looking at the cost of high electricity. So if we want to be competitive, it doesn't matter whether it's defense, automotive, you want to prosper, we have to balance these different criteria. And then offshore is a whole different thing. Offshore, is less of an issue here than in the Northeast, but come to the Northeast and walk into some place, and I've got every fisherman group saying the fish are all gone. I got 192 whale groundings, and there used to be 2, because whales are super sensitive. I mean, watch the great documentary about, the loneliest whale in the world and how, whale songs travel 1,000 miles. I mean, how about you pound a offshore pylon in the ground and it's 220 decibels for like a year, and then they wonder, ear damage, whatever, the whole thing. I mean, it's like what the amount of communities that are against offshore wind, and then that wind costs 3 times as much as the onshore wind, and the onshore wind would never have been built in the first place if it weren't for massive subsidies. So part of it, reliable, affordable, dispatchable, without subsidies, key word. Because you guys, if those sources weren't the cheapest, they were the most expensive in many cases because of the subsidy, and we just can't afford to do that. When last year our nation spent, we had a $2 trillion deficit. That's 2,000 billion. We spent 2,000 billion more last year than we brought in. You guys are in business. That's unsustainable. And people get mad, they're trying to shrink the budget. No, we have to actually, as a country, stop doing the thing where we fund everything for everybody across the whole world. I mean, the order that we set up is a post-World War II economic model not working. And so we're trying to change a number of things simultaneously, but geothermal, nuclear, hydro, we love hydro. We love all of these things. Hydro is an amazing storage capability. These hydro pumps pump it up, bring it down at night. I mean, it's like use the excess power during the day.
Yeah, we have an 1,800 megawatt pump storage facility. Yep. On our PG&E system.
So don't get confused by what people send you. There is no ideology in the decisions that Chris Wright and I are making. We are driven by economics, and we're driven by the necessity of having the power we need to win the AI arms race. And if we're going to have to study energy economics at Stanford and actually come up with a way where something is actually more economic without a subsidy, we'd be all in on it, regardless of the source. But it's not all of the above, because all of the above was this catch-all political phrase, and then all of the above included things that were highly subsidized and things that were highly penalized. Because we were, at the same time we were subsidizing some sources, there was a full-on regulatory attack against the things that were the most affordable, whether it's permitting delays or costs or regulatory demands. So there was an ideological attack. We're trying to take the ideology out of it, get back to a level playing field, and stop having stuff that's highly preferential versus others, and then let them play and let them compete.
Thank you, Secretary Burgum. We have about a minute left, so if Drew or Patti would like to share one final thought as far as response to that, would love to bring you in.
I don't have a response to that. I do think build very responsibly and faster. I do think infrastructure can work and combine it with smart digital technology. When the the case was made earlier as we started today that this is an amazing industry to be in. Energy is where to be. Energy is where the action is and where all the innovation is going to come, because where there are constraints, there comes innovation. Where there comes innovation creates careers and incredible careers like yours, Drew, and like your secretary. It's just go follow the inspiration and the innovation, and it's definitely happening in energy. And we would love to have you come talk to PG&E, because we are definitely changing the world and serving some of the most important companies in the world, in the most important nation in the world, for sure.
The only thing I would say is, if you are so fortunate, when I was graduating in 2003, what was around me was sort of the like echoes of the dot-com bust. And that was what was in the valley and around. Like, it was sort of these kind of still somewhat bloated, dot-coms, and no cool hardware companies to work on at all. Certainly not energy hardware companies. And now you have the opportunity to work in amazing like defense industries, energy industries, working on real hard problems right in your backyard, or at least in this state in Southern California. If you want to go in the defense direction or in the space direction, there's so much amazing hardware engineering opportunities that have huge impacts on everything that was mentioned: AI, energy transformation, energy acceleration, and beyond. So fortunate you all. And the only other thing I would say is, just don't be intimidated. Exactly as Patti said before, if you have kind of physics on your side and you're willing to grind it out, you can do something crazy like build batteries in the United States, or get utility scale storage to cost $200 a kilowatt. So go for it, and don't give up, and do it with your friends. The founding team at Tesla was like, at least on the engineering side, was like 2/3 Stanford engineers. If not for this institution, the thing that is in everybody's brains too often, Tesla and what Tesla made possible through some other people you may have heard of, was really Stanford was a key to that. And you're in the middle of that. You have the ability to leverage that to great outcomes, and please do it. That's what I would say.
Incredible.
Final thought for the students, I would say, as you head into this amazing future with all the opportunity that's been described here, you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be in this room if you didn't have some level of curiosity. But I would say arm yourself with curiosity. And we're in the spot that people have professed was going to happen for decades. We're in a spot where you can get the answer anytime, any place, on any device to almost any question. And so it is less about how much you know and more about how curious you are, because that curiosity leads to deeper queries and challenging and questioning. And I would say, and again, we're also in a world where social media has never been more present. And social media is built around business models that activate people and trigger people. So if you are on social media and you find yourself being angry or mad, the next question you should ask is, who wants me to be angry? Who wants me to be upset? Why do they want me to be upset? What kind of money are they making off of me because I'm upset? Because I'm going to do the next thing and the next thing, because I'm going to keep getting my brain endorphins, to keep going down this rabbit hole versus another thing. And I think one of the tools that has helped me in my career is curiosity, also attached to humility, because it's really helpful if you sort of every day get up and go, I don't know everything I need to know about this subject. If you get up and think you're an expert on something, that's a curiosity killer. I had a chance, Satya Nadella worked for me for the whole 6 years I was at Microsoft.
You did a good job training him.
Thank you. Thank you. And, and his superpowers were humility and curiosity combined together. And I just think that in a world with this amount of new information, with the new tools, with the ability to completely reinvent business models with AI, then those two things are the superpowers you need to, carry forward. And it's what we've tried to teach to our kids. Literally when 20 years ago when I was dropping them off at school, I would never tell them, get good grades and behave and do whatever. They'd say, the door's getting open, they're getting out of the car, and they'd say, I know, ask good questions, because I would say, ask good questions. Then we'd come home at dinner, and dinner wasn't like, what'd you get on your test? I never asked that question once to any of our kids. I said, what was the best question you asked today? What was the best question you asked today? Then we'd go to parent-teacher conferences, and the teacher would be like, damn, your kids ask the hardest questions, whatever. Like everybody, and we wish they'd show up more to class, but when they're here, man, everybody's glad they're here because they're challenging me and they really made me think and whatever. I mean, but now all of us have got a chance to have, an assistant, that speaks every language in the world and has read everything in the world, and it's like right there. And how do you deploy that? To change what you're doing. So anyway, that's what I would say, and not let yourself get into predetermined things. We can solve these problems around economics and the environment. We can do all that, but we have to start from a point where we're actually listening to each other and we're actually focusing on the real solution. And the last thing I would say to close it all out, one of the great inspirations for Interior, because he put away all these public lands, was Theodore Roosevelt. And Theodore Roosevelt said, the great prize in life is the opportunity to work hard at work worth doing. And as these folks are just saying, if you decide to go into the energy business with a background from Stanford, you are gonna be someone who is working on energy security, and energy security is prosperity. Energy security is peace abroad. It is all of those things. And so you've got a chance to grab that great prize in life and work on something that really makes a difference. And I get up every day because of the friends I met at Stanford. Some of them are sitting here in the audience. It changed my life. This place certainly did. Changed the trajectory of what I was doing. A kid from a small town in North Dakota would never have had the chance to do what I was doing. Build a software company, take it public, do all that if it hadn't been for here. So you've been given a gift. I mean, you should get up every day and say how grateful you are to have had this opportunity to be here. But I would pursue it, with as much humility and as much curiosity as you can muster, and great things will happen. You'll grab that great prize. Thank you.